voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Let's talk a little bit about what the president also said just a little while ago about North Carolina's absentee voting system. He said, and I'm quoting him right now, "So let them send it in and let them go vote. And if the system is as good as they say it is, then obviously they won't be able to vote." That sounds like he's actually encouraging people to commit a crime, to vote twice.
I'm sorry, you'll have to read that again.
All right, this is what he said. So let them send it in, the email, the voting by mail, and let them go vote the ballot. Let them send in the ballot, and then let them go vote. And if the system is as good as they say it is, then obviously they won't be able to vote. It sounds like he's encouraging people to break the law and try to vote twice.
Well, I don't know exactly what he was saying, but it seems to me what he's saying is he's trying to make the point that the ability to monitor this system is not good, and if it was so good, if you tried to vote a second time, you would be caught if you voted in person.
That would be illegal if they did that. If somebody mailed in a ballot and then actually showed up to vote in person, that would be illegal.
I don't know what the law in the particular state says.
You can't vote twice.
Well, I don't know what the law in the particular state says and when that vote becomes final.
Is there any state that says you can vote twice?
Well, there's some, maybe that you can change your vote up to a particular time. I don't know what the law is, so I'm not going to offer.
He was saying test the system.
If you know what he's saying, why are you asking me what he's saying?
He doesn't believe in the mail-in voting. You're the Attorney General of the United States.
Why does you? Yeah.
He said if you expand mail-in voting, this is the president. It's reckless.
Well, this is a sort of cheap talk to get around the fundamental problem, which is the bipartisan commission chaired by Jimmy Carter and James Baker said back in 2009 that mail-in voting is fraught with the risk of fraud and coercion.
But since then, there have been until this investigations that haven't proved it.
Let me talk.
Yeah, please.
And since that time, there have been in the newspapers, in networks, academic studies saying it is open to fraud and coercion. The only time the narrative changed is after this administration came in. But elections that have been held with mail have found substantial fraud and coercion. For example, we indicted someone in Texas, 1,700 ballots collected from people who could vote. He made them out and voted for the person he wanted to. Okay? Because that kind of thing happens with mail-in ballots, and everyone knows
But there are individuals cases, but as far as widespread fraud, we haven't seen that since...
we haven't had the kind of widespread use of mail-in ballots as being proposed. We've had absentee ballots from people who request them from a specific address. Now what we're talking about is mailing them to everyone on the voter list when everyone knows those voter lists are inaccurate. People who should get them don't get them, which is what has been one of the major complaints in states that have tried this in municipal elections. And people who get them are not the right people. They're people who have replaced the previous occupant, and they can make them out. And sometimes multiple ballots come to the same address with a whole several generations of occupants. Do you think that's a way to run a vote?
Well, the only thing I'm saying is that so far we haven't seen widespread fraud. But
so far we haven't tried it. Well, and the point is,
but a lot of us. There are several states that only have mail-in voting, including a Republican
Well,
state
this
like
is
Utah.
playing with fire. This is playing with fire. We're a very closely divided country here. And if people have to have confidence in the results of the election and the legitimacy of the government, and people trying to change the rules to this methodology, which, as a matter of logic, is very open to fraud and coercion, is reckless and dangerous. And people are playing with fire.
Well, I will point out there are 5 states that only have mail-in voting, including Utah and Colorado, Washington State, Oregon, Hawaii, and they've reported over the years they've had virtually no problems. But who's trying to change the rules right now?
I would say the people who want to go to mass mail-in ballots.
But you understand why. There is a coronavirus pandemic,
Right.
and there are a lot of people potentially, if they waited long lines when they go to the polls, and they could get sick, especially older people or people with underlying conditions. As a result, a lot of people want to change the rules so they don't have to go wait
Right,
in long
and people-
lines.
well,
they don't have to touch all this
And the
equipment.
appropriate way to deal with that is, number one, arrangements at the polls that protect people, which can be done. And number two, people who have pre-existing conditions and are particularly vulnerable can get an absentee ballot. I have no problem with people. I voted by absentee ballot, not by mail. I actually went to the office to cast my vote. But absentee ballots are fine.
All right, let's move on and talk a little bit about another suggestion. You've said you were worried that a foreign country could send thousands of fake ballots to people, and it might be impossible to detect. What are you basing that on?
I'm basing that, as I've said repeatedly, I'm basing that on logic.
Pardon?
Logic.
But have you seen any evidence that a foreign country is trying to interfere
No, I'm saying
in that
people.
way?
No, I'm saying
by
people are
creating-
concerned about foreign influence, and if we use a ballot system with the system that that states are just now trying to adopt, it does leave open the possibility of counterfeiting ballots,
And
either
so-
by someone here or
so
someone
you think
overseas.
a foreign country could do that?
I think anyone could do it.
Have you seen any evidence that they're trying to do that?
No, but most things can be counterfeited. That's why we go to the trouble of making our money the way we make it. Now, should we have Minnesota print up our money on regular parchment paper?
I asked the question because U.S. intelligence officials have said they've seen no information or intelligence that foreign countries, whether Russia or
Yeah,
China...
well, you asked the question, but I've answered that question several times. I said, no, I don't have any information because this is the first time we've tried such a thing.
During your tenure as Attorney General of the United States, how many indictments have you brought against people committing voter fraud?
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, but several I know of.
Like a handful?
I can't, I don't know.
But several doesn't sound like too many.
Well, I don't know. I don't know how many we have. I know there are a number of investigations right now, some very big ones in states.
The president also has said, and I'm quoting him directly, that he's ready to send sheriffs, law enforcement, and U.S. attorneys to polling places on Election Day. You're the Attorney General. Can the president do that legally?
It depends if he's responding to a particular criminal threat.
But he says he just wants to do it as a precaution.
I didn't hear him say that.
The acting Secretary of Homeland Security, Chad Wolf, said on CNN, we don't have any authority to do that.
Right.
That's what he specifically said.
Well, I'm saying,
is he right?
Well, if there was a specific investigative danger that we detected some problem and risk.
Has he
yes,
raised that possibility with you to send Justice Department, law enforcement to polling places on Election Day, November 3rd?
No.
As a precaution?
No. But sometimes they have been in the past to enforce civil rights.
Because he said we're going to send sheriffs, law enforcement, and U.S. attorneys.
We've done so in the past to enforce civil rights to make sure that people were not being harassed and there was no suppression of vote against African Americans.
Let's talk a little bit about foreign interference, Russia specifically. The top elections official in the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, our Office of National Intelligence, revealed publicly last month that Russia is working to help President Trump get elected, while both China and Iran prefer Joe Biden to win. First of all, do you accept that Russia is once again interfering in the U.S. presidential election?
I accept that there's some preliminary activity that suggests that they might try again.
Well, what does that mean?
Well, that's all I'm saying.
You think that Russia is? You've seen intelligence.
It wouldn't surprise me if Russia tries something again of the same general genre of before. I mean, this influence basically is two kinds of things. It's hack and dump. You get into someone's mail system and then try to disclose embarrassing documents. It wouldn't surprise me if they try something like that, or any other country tries it. The other way is, social media and putting things out on social media.
Because the intelligence community says Russia, China, and Iran are seeking to interfere in the U.S. presidential election for various reasons, but mostly they want to sow dissent in our country, exacerbate racial tensions, et cetera, like that. Of those three countries that the intelligence community has pointed to, Russia, China, and Iran, which is the most assertive, the most aggressive in this area?
I believe it's China.
Which one?
China.
China more than Russia right now?
Yes.
Why do you say that?
Because I've seen the intelligence. That's what I've concluded.
What are they trying to do?
Well, I'm not going to discuss that to this.
But they're trying to help who win?
I'm not going to get into that.
More aggressive than Russia?
Yes.
Because the U.S. intelligence community...
Trying to influence the United States? Yes.
Yeah. I'm just trying to be precise on that area. And one of the most explosive revelations from the recently submitted Senate Intelligence Committee, which is bipartisan, Republicans and Democrats, they report on Russian interference in the 2016 election, and they say that they had confirmation that the Russians did interfere. They cite the case of Paul Manafort, who was the Trump campaign chairman, was working directly with someone the U.S. intelligence community considered to be a Russian intelligence officer. Do you accept that?
I accept that Russia made some efforts to influence the election. I wouldn't say I necessarily accept that.
But do you agree with what the Senate Intelligence Committee concluded, that Russia did directly interfere in the 2016 presidential election with the goal of helping Donald Trump?
Based on the intelligence I've seen, I don't dispute an assessment that they attempted to interfere.
It is Thursday, the 3rd of September of 2020, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Yeah, what's left of the Gulf Coast, boy, it got hammered and is still inundated, and lots of buildings smashed to the ground. So we have another, well, actually not another Katrina. It was worse than Katrina. Weird how we're not really hearing very much about it this time. Well, time heals all, they say. And what I mean by healing in America is that people forget. They just forget, except for the people who are actually living it. And they're living it again, and they're not happy. Fortunately, this time, people did bug out. They got out of town. And so the devastation and deaths that we are hearing about are really those who were just too poor to get out of town. And no one helped them. And that's the kind of America we have now. Survival of the fittest. You have NFL quarterbacks like Kirk Cousins saying he's just going to give up his life to survival of the fittest. Well, you know what, Kirk? Whenever I hear during a pandemic about survival of the fittest, what I hear is that you want to murder my immune-compromised mother, who is 83 years old. How dare you, Kirk? You do that, and I'll at least charge you for manslaughter. We have a story coming up about the Sturgis Rally. I would hope there are some industrious lawyers out there who would file civil penalties against these people and take their motorcycles away from them. Sell them on the open market at whatever, I don't know, inflated price people pay for these stupid machines. And when I say stupid, I'm sorry. You know, I like something a little bit different than the hog. Let's put it that way. Okay? Not that a Moto Guzzi is any easier to work on, but I kind of like the Moto Guzzi better. All right, so there. Anyway, liquidate these things and hand them over to the people who had to put up with the anguish of seeing their loved one expire in such a devastatingly cruel, painful way. Man. So a 60-some-year-old guy, we'll talk about that in a little bit later here, but, they're going to say, oh, well, it wasn't the COVID, it was the underlying conditions. Well, he had these underlying conditions at Sturgis, and now he's dead. Took that quick. Yeah, I just love it. Well, that guy wasn't hit by a car and killed by it. He had a bad heart. And then they'll try to prove, well, actually, he had a heart attack just before the moment of impact because he was scared from the impact. Well, I think the car killed him then, didn't it? Jeez, these people, you got Ted Cruz saying that pregnancy is not a life-threatening illness. Well, first of all, it's not an illness, Ted. Second of all, pregnancy is life-threatening. Haven't you ever read a novel? Some of the great American novels revolved around, moms dying at childbirth. Wives dying at childbirth. Come on. Ted. Well, as I mentioned out there in public, Ted don't know WAP. And, I'm not going to ask his wife. Because obviously she probably wonders about him too, since he's now kissing Trump's ass after what Trump said about his wife. Okay. What is it about the GOP? Did they suspend all common sense? They always whine about, well, we just want to run government with common sense. You don't have any common sense. We want to run government like a business. Yeah, well, business is a dictatorship now, isn't it? Business is not a democracy by and large. I mean, even co-ops. I remember belonging to the cheese board in Berkeley. Oh, God, even the Bison Brewing Company. We had, 125 investors? Try to run that democratically when you got 2 or 3 people that says, oh, we don't want to improve anything. We like the dive bar thing where we're getting health code violations all the time. Fortunately, I wasn't working there when they were getting the health code violations because they never got them when I was. Because, we like to, follow the law. I don't know what's so wrong with that. I'm not going to go all Thoreau on people and say, oh, well, I want people, I think they should just get trichinosis. Why not? Civil disobedience. Well, civil disobedience means you also pay for the crime by doing the time. All right? So, you got the President of the United States, and I don't use that word lightly because we are actually precluded from using the P word with Trump. So I didn't actually say president and his name at the same time, which, I'm still adhering to the Netroots Radio style manual. So we got the President of the United States telling American citizens, mostly his voters, to break the law. He wants his voters to go all Thoreau on our election system. Yeah, use them as guinea pigs. Now, I want you to go out there and then you mail in your ballot, and then I want you to show up and try to vote on election day. And if they stop you, well, then I guess their election protocols and oversight works. He is telling people to commit a felony. I don't know. You would expect that from a mob boss, but not from the President of the United States. Especially one who purports to be about law and order, like Bill Barr. At the top, you should have seen his face. He was just pissed. How dare you tell me the mail-in ballots are not fraud? And then he tells the lie about, absentee ballots, people request them and then they vote. And mail-in ballots, they just get a ballot. No, they don't. They get an application just like a absentee ballot. They fill it out. If they qualify, they get to vote absentee, mail-in ballots. Or they don't. And if they vote mail-in ballot, absentee, and they show up on election day and try to vote, they could and most often are hauled off to jail. And it happens so infrequently that there's not really a big amount of numbers, to show that this is a problem. Except now, the President of the United States has told his voters to go vote twice. To gum up the election system on the day of the election, and he'll say, I won. It's election day. I won. I got to tell you, votes aren't certified sometimes for weeks, a month, or more after an election. Give me a break, Donnie. I know you learned all this from Vlad, but Vlad doesn't know everything about America. That's why he's got a GDP about the size of Italy. All right? I know you're trying to knock us down to that size too so that we're in parity with Vlad. But it's not going to work because this is America. All right? And I think America's starting to get really pissed. We're getting really pissed at these bullies out there with their Trump flags. You know, we will not put out a Biden sign or fly a Kamala Harris, Joe Biden 2020 flag. There's lots of Trump flags around. But it's funny how the Biden signs get stolen and sometimes the actual property is damaged. I've gone through too many reprisals because I put a bullet on our property. Not bullet on our back. A target. That's what I'm trying to say. A target on property that I happen to be living at. I had cars smashed in and tires slashed for having, impeach Nixon bumper stickers. That was fun. Let alone, growing up with, little Molotov cocktails thrown at the garage door because we happen to be working for voting rights, or integration, or any number of things that people just aren't ready for yet. Can't you go slower? The same whining BS I heard growing up, I'm hearing now. There's no evidence that white cops are killing black men or anybody of color in some sort of big way. No. Jesus, Bill Barr. We have our work cut out for us. They're trying to steal an election. They're gaming the refs as we speak. And they're setting in place all of the apparatus from Russia that they can. Oh, yeah. China and even Canada is like for Biden. But they're not hacking our election systems. They're voicing an opinion. All right? Big difference between what Vlad is doing. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, of course, I did allude to Bill Barr getting totally pissed while brazenly lying about election law and mail-in ballots, plus everything else he was on that interview with Wolf Blitzer. Boy, that guy just lies. On the rest of the menu, a second Trump appointee is out at the FDA amid a botched announcement about an experimental therapy for COVID-19. Another one's out for that, huh? A Minnesota biker is the first reported Sturgis Motorcycle Rally fatality from COVID-19. And after struggling for decades with racism and white supremacists, Arkansas communities endorse a hate crimes law effort. Arkansas. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Belarusian journalists face charges for covering the massive protests there. That's one way to do it. And the U.S. blacklisted the International Criminal Court prosecutor over her probe of possible American war crimes in Afghanistan. We're so exceptional. If we commit the crimes, you're not going to charge us for a crime. What do you think this is? A free world? All that and more. On West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, bon appetit. our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is our chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the chat room link, at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, there is a link to our Patreon page, and that's there because, well, even though we try to keep this afloat with what comes out of our own wallets, we are unable to do it without you, as Tom will tell you a little bit later on. And we've been doing this Resistance Radio 24/7, 365 for almost 10 years now. And it's because of the generosity of our listeners who have sent us, in some cases, the amount of an espresso-type coffee drink, and they do that once a month. And that helps us pay our bills, fly under the radar, also amass funds to get newish machinery and the attendant software that is not always included, shall we say. And so that generosity has helped us be able to mitigate all of that. And it's even more important now. Everything's going up. All of our, the backbone of Netroots Radio, those third-party vendors, they kept increasing their bills on us over these many years, and they did it again during a pandemic. But that's how businesses run, and we want to fly under the radar to fulfill our civic duty, and thank you for your generosity in allowing us to fulfill that civic duty as the founders originally intended so long ago. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Thank you, Tom, for taking care of that. I, of course, take care of at Justice Putnam, and I would suggest you go ahead and follow me there because that's where I'm at. And I also post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime and get that linked up on social media. So, hey, it's all pretty darn easy, isn't it? Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and please pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., 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 etc. All right, let's dive into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And it comes out of the Associated Press by Matthew Perrone and Ryan J. Foley. A second Trump administration appointee has been ousted at the FDA, that's the Food and Drug Administration, in the wake of the agency's botched announcement about an experimental therapy for COVID-19, which medical experts said damaged the health regulators' credibility with the public. Why does that continue to happen with this guy in the Oval Office? An FDA spokesman confirmed that John Wolf Wagner, a political appointee installed by the White House earlier this summer, is no longer heading the agency's Office of External Affairs instead. Heidi Rebelo, a longtime FDA career official, has stepped into the position on an acting basis overseeing all FDA public communications, and Politico first reported that news. A spokesman for the Department of Health and Human Services said Wagner would take on a new communications position in the department's Office of Emergency Preparedness and Response, because they need to lie about that over there too, and if it doesn't go well, they got somebody to fire. The shakeup comes just 5 days after conservative communications specialist Emily Miller was removed from her post heading the agency's press office. Miller served just 11 days on the job, but they're not going to call it Scaramucci on her. She's got a Scaramucci there. And helped coordinate the agency's announcement that it had allowed the emergency use of convalescent plasma for COVID-19 patients. I just love that, convalescent plasma. Wow, sounds serious. The announcement triggered a backlash last week after FDA Commissioner Stephen Hahn was forced to correct statements that inflated the potential benefits of the therapy. The FDA's decision to authorize the treatment also followed threats and complaints from Trump, raising concerns that the agency may have buckled to political pressure. I would think those concerns are highly founded. Groves of the AP brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A Minnesota man who attended the Sturgis Motorcycle Rally in South Dakota last month has died from COVID-19, Minnesota health officials reported. It is the first reported coronavirus death that might be linked to the biker rally. At least 290 people in 12 states have tested positive for coronavirus since attending the rally that drew hundreds of thousands of people. The 10-day rally went forward despite fears it could become a super spreader event, with South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem welcoming bikers and the tourist dollars they spend. Wow, people were dying to go to South Dakota to spend their money. Yeah, and they'll take them too. If you're going to die, come to South Dakota. Bikers crowded into bars and rock shows, mostly ignoring social distancing recommendations, and few wore masks. All right. I keep telling everybody that property is always more valuable when delivered vacant to a hostile foreign power, and Vlad is a hostile foreign power. Chris Arisman, infectious disease coordinator for the Minnesota Department of Health, said health officials have also seen infections spread from people who attended Sturgis, but those infections were not included in the state's count of Sturgis-linked infections, which stood at 50 on Wednesday yesterday. She said people who attended the rally have reported moving between events, campgrounds, and indoor and outdoor spaces. Pretty much everyone was in a crowded setting, Asselman said. The man who died in Minnesota was in his 60s, had underlying health conditions, and was hospitalized before he died. For 10 days in August, the rally created a travel hub in western South Dakota comparable to a major U.S. city, according to an analysis of anonymous cell phone data from Camber Systems, a firm that aggregates cell phone activity for health researchers. The researchers found that 61% of all the counties in the United States have been visited by someone who attended Sturgis this summer. Milo of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Community leaders in an Arkansas region that has struggled with racism and white supremacists over the years endorsed an effort by the governor and lawmakers to enact a hate crimes law. The leaders of Harrison and surrounding Boone County signed resolutions denouncing bigotry and racism and urging state lawmakers to pass substantive, comprehensive hate crimes legislation. Republican Governor Asa Hutchinson and a bipartisan group of legislatures earlier this month unveiled a proposal to enhance penalties for crimes motivated by the victim's race, religion, sexual orientation, and other factors. I am hoping now that our community can come together, respect everyone, and move forward in one positive direction, Harrison Mayor Jerry Jackson said at a ceremony with Boone County judges and the head of the Harrison Regional Chamber of Commerce. Harrison, which has a population of about 13,000, was the site of riots in the early 1900s that drove out most of its black population. The Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, one of several Klan factions, uses a Harrison post office box for its mailing address, and its national director lives in a nearby town. billboards with white supremacist messages have appeared in the city over the years. The city leaders have said their reputation is being unfairly tarnished by a small group of people and have tried to counter the messages with their own love your neighbor billboards, but they don't want to be loved, and they don't want to love you either. Arkansas is one of 3 states without a hate crimes law, and the proposal has backing of major companies including Bentonville-based Walmart. South Carolina and Wyoming are the other states without a hate crimes law. All right, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Julia Rosen. Every year, salmon come home to Alaska's frigid rivers to mate, lay their eggs, and die. The state's salmon runs are some of the biggest in the world, but over the past few decades, those big salmon runs have featured ever smaller salmon.
You know, you talk to people up there who've been fishing for a long time, and they're definitely able to tell you that, you know, we just don't see those really large, old salmon that we used to see.
Krista Oak, a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Oak and colleagues at the University of California, Santa Cruz, and elsewhere analyzed records of fish size going back to the 1950s. They included data on some 12.5 million salmon, each of which had to be measured by someone from the Alaska Department of Fish and Game. And there's no question about it, salmon have shrunk. Sockeye salmon today are 2.1% shorter than their ancestors. Chum salmon are 2.4% shorter, and coho are 3.3% shorter. Chinook or king salmon showed the greatest declines at 8%. That's an average difference of more than 2 inches in length. The study is in the journal Nature Communications. The researchers haven't nailed down the exact reasons behind this trend, but their analysis suggests that climate change and competition with wild and hatchery-raised salmon both play a role. They also discovered that much of the change in body size is due to fish returning from the ocean at a younger age now than in the past. Oak says fish could be returning earlier because they're reaching maturity faster for some reason, or because the ocean has become a riskier place for older salmon to survive.
What could be happening is the salmon that otherwise would have returned large and old just aren't making it that long.
Whatever the cause, this size shift has massive ramifications for people and the environment. Oak and her team calculated that catching smaller fish may have already slashed the value of Alaska's commercial salmon fisheries by 21%. It's also likely reduced the food available to subsistence fishers, many of whom rely on stores of salmon to get them through the long, harsh winter, by as much as 26%. On the ecological side, the researchers estimated that smaller fish lay 16% fewer eggs, which could depress salmon populations in the future. And the salmon bring 28% fewer nutrients into the watersheds where they spawn, according to the study.
After they breed and die, their carcasses actually fertilize freshwater and terrestrial ecosystems with these marine-derived nutrients that are really important and that get used by all kinds of animals like bears and songbirds and even taken up into trees.
With no single factor to blame for shrinking salmon, there's no obvious fix, Oak says. But there are still plenty of fish in the sea. They're just smaller than they used to be. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Julia Rosen.
He seems sorry.
We very clearly told him not to look up there.
I'm honestly impressed that he was able to do it.
Right? But did he balance on that big chair?
Yeah, I mean, I guess he'll just know what his gifts are this year.
I really thought we had hidden them well.
If they can find their presents, they can find a gun.
911, what is your emergency?
Every day, 8 kids and teens are unintentionally killed or injured by loaded and unlocked guns. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and End Family Fire.
Hi, it's Tom.
could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution, and you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1991. That was the day that a fire killed 25 workers at the Imperial Food Products plant in Hamlet, North Carolina. More than 50 workers were also injured. The plant made chicken products for fast food restaurants and grocery stores. According to an article in the New York Times, the plant was, quote, a warren of ramshackle buildings. The fire started with hydraulic fluid from a ruptured line spraying into gas flames that heated large oil-filled cooking vats. 90 workers were inside when the fire began. Some were able to escape out the main entrance or a loading bay, but the emergency exits of the plant were locked from the outside. A worker said that this was on the order of the company owner, Emmett J. Rowe, to stop workers from stealing chicken. A passerby, Sam Breeden, was interviewed by the Associated Press. He described the tragic scene saying, quote, they were screaming, let me out. They were beating on the door. The people could not force the door open. At the time of the fire, the company had not had a fire inspection in 11 years. An inspection after the fire found 54 willful violations. The company was fined more than $800,000. Although this was the highest fine in the history of North Carolina, it was far less than federal fines for similar workplace disasters. That's because North Carolina has a state-run occupational health and safety program. At the time of the fire, nearly half of the country had state-run safety inspections. And what of the company's owner, Emmett Rowe? He was convicted of 25 counts of involuntary manslaughter, serving just 4 years.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
It seems that every day the White House comes out with another gaslighting outrage. The latest in the form of a memo from the president directing federal officials to find ways to cut funding to a number of cities controlled by Democrats, citing violence amid protesters against systemic racism in policing. Trump claims the leaders of Portland, Oregon, Washington, D.C., Seattle, and New York City have abdicated their duties and are allowing anarchy, violence, and destruction. Again, Trump is laying all the blame for violence, rioting, and looting on the protesters from the left, ignoring the facts that the right-wing extremist groups like the Boogaloo Boys and armed militias are actively infiltrating peaceful protests intent on sowing violence and chaos. And another day, another story of a black man killed by police. This time it was in Rochester, New York, where the family of Daniel Prude is calling for the firing and arrest of the officers involved. According to video and records they released on Wednesday, Daniel Prude was detained by police after running naked through the streets of Rochester. He died of asphyxiation after a group of these officers knelt on him, put a hood over his head, and pressed his face into the pavement for 2 minutes. Prude died March 30th after he was taken off life support 7 days after the encounter with the police. His death received no public attention until Wednesday when his family held a news conference and released the police body camera video and written reports they obtained through a public records request. Meanwhile, Attorney General Bill Barr said during an interview on CNN that he thinks the deaths of black Americans at the hands of police aren't racially motivated and that a false narrative has been created about their prevalence.
No, I don't think they're two justice systems. I think the narrative that that the police are on some epidemic of shooting unarmed black men is simply a false narrative, and also the narrative that that's based on race. The fact of the matter is it's very rare for an unarmed African American to be shot by a white police officer. There were 10 cases last year.
Seriously? The Attorney General says that it's not necessarily racism when police repeatedly treat black people differently than white people?
There appears to be a phenomenon in the country where African Americans feel that they're treated, when they're stopped by police frequently, as suspects before they're treated as citizens. I don't think that necessarily reflects some deep-seated racism in police departments or in most police officers.
Perhaps Barr would make better use of his time as Attorney General in stopping the president from committing felonies, like what he did on Wednesday when he advocated that his supporters commit felonies. Yeah, while in North Carolina on Wednesday, Trump directed his followers to vote twice. Once by mail and again in person.
If you get the unsolicited ballots, send it in and then go make sure it counted. And if it doesn't tabulate, you vote. You just vote. And then if they tabulate it very late, which they shouldn't be doing, they'll see you voted and so it won't count. So send it in early and then go and vote. And if it's not tabulated, you vote and the vote is going to count. You can't let them take your vote away. These people are playing dirty politics. Dirty politics. So if you have an absentee ballot, or as I call it, a solicited ballot, you send it in. But I would check it in any event. I would go and follow it and go vote.
The problem is the Attorney General is complicit in that crime. In that same CNN interview on Wednesday, Barr backed up Trump's false conspiracy theory that the November presidential election could be tainted by widespread mail-in voting fraud, with absolutely no evidence or even one fact to back up his assertion. And then there's this. The Department of Homeland Security withheld publication of a July intelligence bulletin warning of a Russian effort to push allegations about the poor mental health of Joe Biden. The draft bulletin was submitted to the department's Legislative and Public Affairs Office and was never intended for the public, but it was supposed to be sent to federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies. But an hour after it was submitted, the Department of Homeland Security's chief of staff asked officials to, quote, hold on sending this one out until discussing it with Acting Secretary of Homeland Security Chad Wolf. The report was never distributed, even though legal analysts had high confidence in the assessment. House Democrats have vowed to investigate. The House Oversight Committee on Wednesday subpoenaed Postmaster General Louis DeJoy for records about the widespread mail delivery delays that have come about due to the changes he implemented. The subpoena comes after Committee Chair Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney said DeJoy has not sufficiently answered the panel's requests for more information. The German government has concluded, following toxicology tests, that Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny was indeed poisoned with a chemical nerve agent from the Novichok group of Soviet-era chemical weapons. European leaders, including the UK's Boris Johnson and Germany's Angela Merkel, condemned the poisoning and implored Russia to provide an explanation. Merkel saying there are very serious questions now which only the Russian government can and must answer. Donald Trump, despite spending a good portion of the day attacking his political opponents on Twitter, remained silent on the subject. And then there's this story kicking around under the radar, but deserving some serious attention. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo announced new sanctions against 2 members of the International Criminal Court. It's the Trump administration's most aggressive move yet to try to derail an ICC investigation into possible war crimes committed by U.S. military members and intelligence officials. And although the administration is seemingly doing nothing to stop foreign interference in our elections, Facebook has announced plans to block new advertising the week before the election. This is the first time the company has taken any action to limit political advertising in the U.S. This move is an attempt to reduce misinformation that's expected to flood social networks as Election Day draws near. Speaking of the elections, the Commission on Presidential Debates has announced its lineup of moderators. And for some reason, they awarded Fox News the first one, because they've been so fair and balanced. Anyway, Chris Wallace will moderate the first Biden-Trump matchup in Cleveland on September 29th. C-SPAN's Steve Scully will moderate the second one happening October 15th in Miami. And Kristen Welker from NBC News will moderate the final debate on October 22nd in Nashville. Susan Page, the Washington bureau chief of USA Today, will moderate the one and only vice presidential debate between Senator Kamala Harris and Mike Pence on October 7th in Salt Lake City. And finally, it seems like a pattern emerging in which a Democratic administration builds the economy up and a Republican administration comes in and destroys it. The U.S. government debt will exceed the size of the economy in the 2021 federal fiscal year for the first time since World War II, this according to the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office. The federal debt hit 98% of the nation's gross domestic product in the current fiscal year, which ends September 30th, due to the government's massive coronavirus relief spending. Somehow, the borrowing surge hasn't panicked investors who've continued to prop up the U.S. stock market, which closed at record highs on Wednesday. And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com, and please click on that donate button.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro's Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 60 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of about 102, maybe a tad higher. We are in an active heat advisory warning and will be so for at least another 5 days, maybe more. Abundant sunshine should prevail throughout the day. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Clear skies tonight. Lows in the mid to low 60s. Winds will shift out of the northwest at 5 to 10. With sunny skies tomorrow and a high, looks like maybe below 100, but that means about 100 to 102. And winds will be out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon now is at 835, and we have another death added to the mix, and we now stand at 3, still a gross undercount. And yes, our county has been visited by bikers who live here who went to Sturgis. Thank you guys and your gals. Let's see, ragweed pollen is moderate right outside the window here at the mothership, and the air quality index for the region is rated good at 41 parts per million. That's a little high for good, but it's still good. And the daytime UV index is high at 7. Barometric pressure is still holding steady at this time of day at 30.02 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 58%. Oh, it's a dry heat. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. London is 71 degrees with a rain shower. Paris is 81 and fair. Rome is 82 and sunny. Kyiv is 75 and fair. Kabul is 76 and partly cloudy. Hong Kong is 81 and clear. Tokyo is 82 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 70 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 55 degrees and cloudy. And New York is 78 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Juris Carminow of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Dozens of journalists gathered outside a police station in the capital of Belarus to protest the detention of colleagues covering a demonstration against the nation's authoritarian president and an election the opposition sees as rigged. Police detained several journalists from Belarusian news outlets on charges of taking part in an unsanctioned demonstration. They could receive fines or jail sentences of up to 15 days if charged and convicted. We are witnessing the lawless action of law enforcement agencies which are muzzling journalists without bothering about methods. Olga Loiko, a journalist with Belarus' popular online news outlet Tut.by. Police detained her colleague, Vadim Zamarkovska, a photographer with Tut.by. He told the Associated Press that he was released after police officers threw him into a van, beat him up, and checked his ID and press card.
Je te donne, c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mais automne, quand les feuilles tombent partout, si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Daphne Saladakis and Michelle Nichols of Reuters bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The United States imposed sanctions on International Criminal Court prosecutor Fatou Bensouda, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said, over her investigation into whether American forces committed war crimes in Afghanistan. Pompeo also said that Kiso Mochechoko, the head of the ICC's Jurisdiction Complementarity and Cooperation Division, had also been blacklisted under sanctions authorized by Trump in June that allow for asset freezes and travel bans. Today we take the next step because the ICC continues to target Americans, sadly, Pompeo told reporters. Pompeo also said that individuals and entities that continue to materially support Bensouda and Mochechoko would risk exposure to sanctions as well. The ICC dismissed the measures as another attempt to interfere with the court's judicial and prosecutorial independence and said in a statement that it stood by the work of its staff. All right, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, and you do know Netroots Radio will broadcast on, and we'll meet up tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, so we can steal our nerves for Labor Day weekend. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.